You are all welcome to the defense session of Selamo Milice Jumla Jinka, and it is going to be chaired by the chief examiner.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, we are here this morning for the defense of Ms. Selamo Milice Jumla Jinka, who is defending a project report at the Department of Development Studies, impartial fulfillment of the awards of a master's degree, a BSc, I'm used to masters, BSc in Gender, Migration and Refugee Studies. So before we start, we'll kindly invite the attendants here, please kindly switch off your phone or you put it in silent mode. Proceeding. And please, the candidate will be given 10 minutes for preliminary presentation, and at the end of this presentation, please don't clap. But for this defense, sitting at this table with, at my left, the supervisor, Mr. Babila, who supervised the student, who knows this work more than any other person on this table. Then at my left, you have Mr. Gilbert Eko, who will be the examiner for this defense. So, without wasting much time, I'll give the floor to the candidate to tell us, in a nutshell, what the work is all about. Please, ma'am, you have the floor.
Of the jury, honorable members of the jury, fellow invitees, good morning to you all. The topic for our presentation is on the factors influencing refugees' access to sustainable livelihoods. The case of Central African refugees in the Timangolo Refugee camp in the east region of Cameroon. The outline of our presentation will be as follows. We'll have the introduction, the literature review and theoretical framework, followed by methodology of the study, then the presentation and analysis of data, and finally the summary of findings, conclusion and recommendations. Introduction. The outbreak of the First World War from 1914 to 1918 led to the start of refugee crisis with an estimated number of 1.85 million refugees in the world. This was followed by the Second World War from 1939 to 1945, which led to a drastic increase in the number of refugees in the world. This led to the creation of the United Nations High Commission for Refugees by the UN General Assembly in 1950. The organization started its operation in 1951 with a clear mandate of protecting displaced war victims. According to the BBC News of 20th June 2014, Antonio Guterres, the head of the United Nations High Commission for Refugees at the time, by 2014, stipulated that those who live as refugees from war and persecution exceeded 50 million by 2013, and were about 65.5 million by the end of, exceeded 20 million by 50 million by 2013, and were about 65.5 by the end of 2016. 5 million refugees in the world. And Africa too is an area of concern as far as refugee crises are concerned. Africa has been considered an emitting ground for refugees, which led to the creation of the Organization of the African Unity Convention in 1969. This was known as the OAU Convention. This OAU Convention was further fused into national laws of most African countries. Cameroon, for example, acceded to the 1951 Refugee Convention and to the OAU Convention. The 1996 Cameroon Constitution, which is the prime law of the law, has ratified that international treaties shall override national laws. We need to know that refugee laws have been very slow in Cameroon. For example, we have law number 1990/043 of 1990, which lays down conditions for entry, stay, and exit of aliens, And we equally have the 1977 Immigration Act, which stated that a card will be given to those who qualify for asylum in the host country. These laws were greatly criticized because they did not really protect the interests of refugees. They did not define how refugees were to be in the host community, whether they were protected from defilement, that's sending them back to their country without resolving their plight. And we need to know that, there was the enactment of the 27th July 2005 law due to the slow nature of the aforementioned laws. And the enactment of this 27th July 2005 law was due to the fact that there are increasing number of refugees in Cameroon. We might want to know why refugees choose Cameroon. Cameroon because Cameroon is the only stable democracy in Central Africa and surrounded by neighbors who for decades have faced serious socio-political conflicts. Cameroon is equally hospitable and considered a safe haven for Central African, Chad, and Nigerian refugees. But refugee camp. Upon arrival at the camp, the Timangolo Refugee camps are given lands and seedlings to cultivate and attain a livelihood. Unfortunately, most of their activities are often short-lived with no sustainable impact. So we want to find out the factors limiting their access to sustainable livelihood. 2014 to 2019. 2014, because that's when the camp was created. 2015 saw a mass influx of these refugees into the Timangolo Refugee camp. And 2019, because that's the year the study was carried out. Geographically, the Timangolo camp is a humanitarian setup in the locality of Timangolo, in the Kade subdivision, located some 45 kilometers away from the Central African borders. And Timangolo is a rural community in the municipality of Kete. The study focuses on refugees in the Timangolo refugee camp as the main sampling population. Cameroon currently has 1,214,714 people of concern, including 275,711 Central African refugees and 138,315 Nigerian refugees. Their presence poses serious economic and security burdens on the host country, Cameroon. And Cameroon is a signatory to the 1951 and the OAU Convention. But unfortunately, mindful of all these laws, refugees in Cameroon still have few assets, limited support, and are constrained by legal, cultural, and linguistic barriers. Some of them at the Timangolo camp, they engage in activities such as commercial bike riding, tailoring, shoe mending, and stuff, just to make a living. But their engagements do not have any sustainable impact. So this study brings out the factors that hinder their access to sustainable livelihoods. For the research questions, our main research question is, what are the factors influencing refugees' access to sustainable livelihoods in Cameroon? The policy environment in Cameroon influence refugees' access to sustainable livelihoods. The second one is, how does the education qualification level of refugees influence their access to sustainable livelihoods? And the third is, how does the socio-economic environment in Cameroon influence these refugees' access to sustainable livelihoods? Objectives of the study. The objectives go in line with the research questions. The main objective is to examine the factors influencing refugees' access to sustainable livelihoods in Cameroon. And the sub-objective includes to examine how the policy environment of Cameroon influences refugees' access to sustainable livelihoods. Furthermore, to explore how refugees' education qualification influence their access to sustainable livelihoods, and then to establish how the socio-economic environment of Cameroon influences refugees' access to sustainable livelihoods. Critical framework, the literature review equally goes in line with the objective of the study, starting with the influence of the policy framework on refugees' access to sustainable livelihoods. We did a review on Harry Jacobson's paper of 2002 on the pursuit of livelihood by refugees and the impact on the human security on the host community. According to Harry Jacobson, displacement, destroys livelihoods, and forces people to adopt new strategies. And Karen argues that refugees pursue livelihoods in two domains, in camps and in settlements, where the and stakeholders can play a great part in helping these refugees access a sustainable livelihood of which the local population will greatly benefit. Karen mentioned an interview she had with one local chief, and she said it is thanks to the presence of refugees in his community that they now have classrooms on access to sustainable livelihoods. We did a review on the Women Refugee Commission Livelihood Assessment Report on Refugees in Kampala, Uganda, 2010, titled "The Living Ain't Easy on Language Barriers." According to the Women Refugee Commission, language barriers limit refugees from accessing the economic market in the host community. We have the third objective, which is influence of socioeconomic environment on refugees' access to sustainable livelihoods. And we did a review of the United Nations High Commission for Refugees Assessment Report on livelihoods and strategy for livelihoods promotion in Jordan on the 2nd of July 2009. We have the theoretical framework. The theory that best suits this study on sustainable livelihoods for refugees is the theory of institutionalism by Robert Cohen of 1943 in his discussion, the regime theory. According to the theory, collaboration between the different stakeholders, as the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, the non-governmental organizations, national and international donors, their collaboration can assist a lot in helping resolve the plight faced by refugees in the host community. We have the methodology of the study. The model that was used in the study is a Nordic model. This model was propounded by Ronald Lehman in 1930 on social protection. It talks about social and gender equality, respect of human rights, free or subsidized education, and affordable health care. The model equally emphasizes on inclusive participation of all members of the society whose activities are sustainable, and it is built upon ladders of opportunities, including access to legal protection, education, and gainful activities. Description of variables in the model. We have 3 independent variables, which are the objectives, and 1 dependent variable, which is the access to sustainable livelihoods by the access to opportunities by refugees. Study design. We adopted a descriptive and a cross-sectional survey study design for the study. Study population. The study population includes refugees in the Timangolo Refugee camp, 7,000 of them, between the ages of 19 and 40, especially those who've been in the camp for more than a year, so that they could provide us with concise and clear data. And the work equally included stakeholders at the refugee camp. Sampling technique and sample size. The sample size that was used is the sample size proposed by Cressy and Morgan in 1990. We have the formula on the board, which gave us a sample size of 364. Data collection. For an accurate data collection, the researcher made use of both primary and secondary data. Primary data was gotten through questionnaires, which was the main research tool, interviews, observation checklists, and focus group discussions. And secondary data through a review of various published and unpublished documents, magazines, and internet research. Analytical approach. We used 2 approaches to analyze the data. We used the quantitative and the qualitative method. Qualitative analysis was based on descriptive statistics, and the quantitative and the qualitative analysis was based on content analysis. And the data that the primary and secondary data made use of SPSS to analyze the work. Validation of the results. A tools defense was organized in school by experts to ensure validity in the research tools. And the researcher, together with the supervisor, revised the research tools over and over to reduce ambiguity and ensure validity. presentation and analysis of data. The researcher got response from 364 respondents, which was the sample size. Means participation was 100%. And our data will be analyzed according to the objectives. We have the influence of the Cameroon policy framework on access to sustainable livelihoods by refugees living in the Timangolo camp. The highest percentage, 66% of the 100 respondents, do not possess either a work permit or a business license. And according to the camp manager, Mr. Awalu Mohammadi, most of them, what they have is contracts, and they call it a contract. And the reason why they are able to have these business licenses and work permits is due to the fact that the process of acquisition in Cameroon, of acquiring work permits in Cameroon, is way too complex. And these refugees lack mastery of the official languages in Cameroon. And according to Mr. Baseme Kulimoshi, that's the coordinator of the United Nations High Commission for Refugees in the East region of Cameroon, according to him, refugees are constrained by legal, cultural, and linguistic barriers. And when we had an interview with him, he told us, I quote, "Those refugees, we do not know who they are. So to protect the Cameroon citizens, we decide to leave them at the borders. Some of them can be rebels, terrorists, kidnappers, one never knows. So to keep the Cameroon citizens safe, we decide to keep them at the borders." Qualification and access to sustainable livelihoods by refugees in Timangolo. A majority, 54% of the respondents, indicated not to have gone to school at all, while 24% affirmed to primary education, 22% affirmed to have attended secondary education, 0% of the respondents had attended the university level. And only 2% of the respondents can speak or understand English or French. So the researcher made use of a translator to be able to collect data. And 98% of these respondents cannot speak or understand either English or French. All they can understand is their mother tongue, Fulfulde. Socioeconomic environment, that's the third objective. The socioeconomic environment and access to sustainable livelihoods by refugees in the Timangolo camp. Most of where they live and work, 65% affirm to a good relationship with the host community, but 92% of these refugees affirm to be facing serious discrimination, especially from the Cameroon police. We had an interview with one of the refugees who told us that anytime he comes across a police officer, he becomes very angry because he knows that he will definitely share the little he earned for the day with him, money that is not even enough to feed himself and his family. And the Timangolo, according to our observations, the Timangolo refugee camp is way too underdeveloped, and they lead very poor standards of living. They do not have, they lack good roads, a good source of drinking water, electricity, hotels, financial institutions, good schools, hospitals. The village is just so underdeveloped, and they have very large family sizes for the little activities they engage in. If you can see there, it's not very clear. It's a store, and that happens to be the biggest store in the Timangolo refugee camp. And with an interview, we interviewed that man. He has 9 members in his family. 9 members with that store, and all of them are unemployed, meaning they're depending only on this store for a living. And this happens to be a market day in the Timangolo village. We interviewed this lady. She told us that she has sold just 500 francs since morning. That was around 4 p.m. She has sold just 500 francs. And just, you see, that's a market day, but it's way too empty because the place is too underdeveloped. So people, other Cameroonians cannot go doing business with them and stuff. Conclusion. Refugees in the Timangolo refugee camp are faced with mammoth challenges in their pursuit for livelihoods. Though the laws of Cameroon permit them to engage in livelihoods, the laws are not very flexible. They are not flexible enough for these refugees to acquire work permits and business licenses. Also, the lack of education and mastery of the official languages of Cameroon, that's English and French, limits these refugees access to the Cameroon labor market. And then the corrupt and money-minded nature of the Cameroon police force, low income, and lack of work options in the Timangolo village, coupled with the high underdevelopment in that part of the country, can be held responsible as factors limiting refugees' access to sustainable livelihoods. For the recommendations, we have recommendations for the United Nations High Commission for Refugees and recommendations for the Cameroon government. We'll start with the Cameroon government. It is recommended that the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, together with the Cameroon government through the Ministry of External Relations, should advocate for the issuance of work permits and business licenses and regular capacity building of security officers to eliminate any form of harassment of refugees by security officers. And also, there is a need for serious socio-economic development in the Timangolo village. And for the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, it should carry on more sensitization campaigns on the need to go back to school. And for those who are not willing, because most of them are not willing, for those who are not willing, the United Nations should ensure trainings at the camp so that at least they can use those trainings to achieve a livelihood for themselves. And then the United Nations High Commission for Refugees should also reorient the nature of their support. They should not just focus on short-term delivery of food and non-food items, but they should focus more on sustainable projects where these refugees can engage in and lead sustainable and have access to sustainable lives. Thanks for your keen attention.
Okay. Selamo Milice Jumla Jinka, you approximately tried to respect the time you were given. Anyway, I had no other choice than allowing you go through and express the mind, what you have for us. So I'll give the floor now to the supervisor who followed you up and who certainly has something to say about the candidate and about the work. So, Mr. Babla, tell us who Selamo Milice is and how you people worked.
Thank you very much, Mr. President of the jury. It is a great privilege and honor to be on this jury with you. And I also appreciate the presence of Mr. President. And thanks for the floor. Here before us we find Selamo Jumla. I don't like to call her Jumla. And she's one of our pioneer students in the BSc program for Gender and Migration Studies. And their batch was the first in the Yaoundé Learning Support Center that came in October 2016. And she's a very committed girl, very excited for success and learning. I remember right from the first day she came for orientation, I was the one who received her. And she came with a very precise mindset that I want to do something related to humanitarian assistance and this. And when we presented the program, so she said, I'm going to do gender and migration, refugees studies. Also, all through the sessions we have had, I also noticed that Jumla is a very creative girl. She's dynamic. Apart from studies, she gets to do other creative arts work. She gets very busy with other issues, like, for example, the first part of the work or subject that she wanted to work on. She wanted to work on something of how local NGOs can contribute to the sustainable livelihood of refugees due to some nutritive products that she gets involved with NGOs in producing. So she's very, very creative. And she has been very committed to her research work. I want to say that maybe coming into taking the topic, she didn't know it was quite difficult, tough. And also, the strictness I laid on to ensure that she has to toe the line and do her work well. I'm sure several times it made her to cry because I don't hesitate to sanction and even send her away when she does not respect the protocols for the work.
Selamo Milice Jumla Jinka, you approximately tried to respect the time you were given. Anyway, I had no other choice than allowing you go through and express the mind, what you have for us. So I'll give the floor now to the supervisor who followed you up and who certainly has something to say about the candidate and about the work. So, Mr. Babla, tell us who Selamo Milice is and how it even worked.
Thank you very much, Mr. President of the jury. It is a great privilege and honor to be on this jury with you. And I also appreciate the presence of Mr. Gilbert. And thanks for the floor. Here before us we find Selamo Jumla. I don't like to call her Jumla. And she's one of our pioneer students in the BSc program for Gender and Migration Studies. And their batch was the first in the Yaoundé Learning Support Center that came in October 2016. And she's a very committed girl, very excited for success and learning. I remember right from the first day she came for orientation, I was the one who received her. And she came with a very precise mindset that I want to do something related to humanitarian assistance and this. And when we presented the program, so she said, I'm going to do gender and migration refugees studies. Also, all through the sessions we have had, I also noticed that Jumla is a very creative girl. She's dynamic. Apart from studies, she gets to do other creative arts work. She gets very busy with other issues, like, for example, the first part of the work or subject that she wanted to work on. She wanted to work on something of how local NGOs can contribute to the sustainable livelihood of refugees due to some nutritive products that she gets involved with NGOs in producing. So she's very, very creative. And she has been very committed to her research work. I want to say that maybe coming into taking the topic, she didn't know it was quite difficult, tough. And also, the strictness I laid on to ensure that she has to toe the line and do her work well. I'm sure several times it made her to cry because I don't hesitate to sanction and even send her away when she does not respect the protocols for the work. The topic very exciting, very nice, and it's an updated topic. First of all, we need to understand that according to the Executive Committee of the United Nations Commission Program, in 2019, by May, they made us to understand that there are cardinal issues that the world is facing. And the very first one is the issue of migration. Migration of so many persons, mass influx from one part of the world to another. What is the cause? The increasing number of crises that are taking place in the world. And what more of Africa particularly. And among the cardinal targets for the United Nations for the year 2019, it is what? Ensuring the sustainable livelihood of refugees, on how that has to be done. So that makes us to understand that refugee crisis is refugee protection and their livelihood is a serious issue and the heartbeat of the United Nations. Concerning the humanitarian assistance to various parts of the world. So what can we therefore do in order to ensure that refugees can have an alternative livelihood instead of depending on emergency aid that comes to them at the very beginning of their crisis? So Jumla, I think she has taken a lot of time to work on her work, and presenting this work to you in front of this jury, I think is acceptable. at the level of the supervision, and that is why we are here to table the work in front of your high expertise to also look at the lapses and enable this work not to only end at the level of the library, but it should be a published article at the end of the day. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Babla, the supervisor. Ms. Jumla, you have heard what your supervisor just said about you. Is there any point you disagree with? Any comment?
No, sir.
Because one does not know what he just said, that maybe he didn't present things quite well as you expected them to be. Well, I will give the floor to Mr. Gilbert, experienced geographer, and allow me to, please, before we continue, express my delight to share this jury with you. People, Mr. Babla and Mr. Gilbert, who are all well known. It's not the first time they are meeting, though it's the first time we are sharing the same jury together. I must appreciate at least the interactions that we have and the professional interactions that we have daily on other issues that I will not necessarily mention here. And also seize this opportunity to thank Mr. Gilbert for all the maps he has been doing for me, right, my master's level. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, so you have the floor as the examiner for this defense, so you have to tell us what maybe the supervisor didn't want to say, or he kept for himself to favor his candidate.
Thank you, the president of the jury. Thank you, Mr. Babila, the supervisor, and good afternoon to the audience. The choice of the topic, which is how displaced persons are feeling, is very correct. The massive or forceful displacement of people and the horrors they undergo in their host communities is a thorn in the flesh of the United Nations, of African Union, and the host countries where these refugees are. Because the United Nations, the African Union, and the host countries will not like to see human beings suffering in their homeland. So, we are all saying that tomorrow, I'm sure yes, the 16th, will be the United Nations Day for statistics, and the theme which has been published is better data for the management of refugees. The problem of refugees, as Mr. Doe said, is becoming alarming. Every day, African continent, especially Africa, most people are displaced, and most of them are displaced forcefully to destinations which they don't know. And when you are displaced forcefully, you become very vulnerable. You don't have the things that you need to take care of yourself, and where you go to, they need to take care of you. So this topic is very captivating. It is a domain in international relations where many people have not yet ventured in. We are all witness to the fact that crises, whether natural or conflict, are increasing in the continent, and people are continually being forced to leave their residence and seek refuge elsewhere, of which we are not exempted, because no one knows when he or she can become a refugee. So when refugee comes into a country, there are certain laws which guide the refugee management, of which we are to look at one, which is sustainable livelihood for refugees. So I have also learned very much from this work, because she has been to the field. She has enriched my knowledge in the domain of refugee management. And the candidate also portrays a sense of a spirit of investigation, research, and shows great interest in making findings that will improve on the way refugees will be managed. As the supervisor said, the work needs to be published. But before that, I have read through the work very keenly, and I will make my comments. Concerning the form of the work, it is good. She respected the police size, the interspacing. In her literature and theoretical framework, all of them were well presented. But now when we go into the content, what she wrote inside the thesis, I will propose to her, or these are some of the corrections which she is supposed to take note. The first is on the topic. On the topic, factors influencing refugees' access to sustainable livelihoods in Cameroon, the case of Central African refugees in the Timangolo Refugee camp, Betwa. The scope of the study should be clearly stated in the topic with spatial and temporal delimitation. You did a spatial delimitation on the topic, but you did not put a temporal delimitation on the topic. I saw it, but inside your work, where you say that it's supposed to be from 2015 to 2019. That one, you are supposed to add it on the topic, because when you just write it like this, we don't know when factors influencing refugees' access to sustainable livelihoods in Cameroon started, whether it was in the 90s or in the year 2000. So you have to put the temporal delimitation. It was omitted. Second remark on page 4. On page 4, acknowledgement, where you have acknowledged so many people. Most often we acknowledge the people who contributed scientifically for the realization of the work. There is a place where during the last set of people where you acknowledge people and institutions who contributed in one way or the other to the realization of your research work. You should avoid mentioning names of people who did not contribute, like the last set of people there, where you name them, your siblings and the rest, and you say, I love you all. They did not contribute. I did not see their contribution to this work. So you should avoid mentioning them. And then there's another, there are some other omissions in the list of abbreviation in page 10, Roman 10. List of abbreviation. NGO is abbreviated as non-governmental organization and not as non-governmental institutions. OAU is Organization of African Unity. OAU is African, typing error there. The OAU further contextualized, I'm sure it's the last paragraph, the sentence said that the OAU further contextualized the 1951 Convention on the Status of Refugee in 1967. It is in 1969. And then there's another sentence there that Cameroon, for example, acceded to the 1969 Organization of African Unity Convention. It is Cameroon ratified, not acceded. Cameroon ratified. So on page 2, you will take note of that one. And then page 3 and 6, you continuously use the word refoulement of refugees. It is accepted in refugee studies, but it has its English connotation. Yeah, that yes, it's accepted, but the English connotation is non-expulsion or expulsion. So you should add the non-expulsion. When you put refoulement, you put non-expulsion in quotes so that the person who is reading the book, if he is not an expert in the domain, can easily understand. On page 4, there's a sentence there that geographically is not really correct. The distance between Cameroon and Central Africa is 952 kilometers. The distance between Cameroon and Central Africa is 952 kilometers. People who are border countries. Once the border, you get into the other country. So you will also correct that one. They are neighbors, so there is no distance separating the two of them. Page 4. You also, no, still on page 4, you said that the overthrown, you said the runaway of President Bozizi. The runaway of President Bozizi. I think that was the first paragraph up. The overthrown of President Bozizi, not the runaway. So those are, I'm sure, omissions that you did not take note of. And then, on page 5 and page 9, when you were locating Timangolo, when you want to locate a place, you try to give a geographic description that will permit the reader to easily have a visual perception of the place. You give the reader a visual perception of the place. You just say you were not very precise on your geographic location. Either you can say it is in the north, south, west of Baturi, or you can make a small sketch map of the area to give a geographical location of the place, because most people, if you tell them about Timangolo, most of them have not heard of the name, and it is a village. It's not even an administrative unit that is well known. So when you have to do it, you draw a map of the area so that it will give a good location of the place for the research. So you should write source, you put the author before you add your name. You write the year when you did the field work. And then on page 28, on page 28, there's a technical error here, where you said, are you registered with either the United Nations High Commission for Refugees? So when a person enters a country, he is an asylum seeker. If he is a refugee, he is registered. So you cannot be a refugee when you are not registered. So rectify that place of that 27, because the 27, it means that you are saying that you are contradicting yourself, where you say all of them are refugees. When they are refugees means they are registered. And then here again, you have mentioned 27 people who are not registered. So the 27 people cannot be in the camp. Anybody who enters a camp, their conclusion and their recommendations are too scanty. I'm sure that you have to clarify, which when I read through your work, I did not really understand. It is not well stated. There is something which I did not get very clear when I read through your work. Sustainable livelihood of refugees. Do the refugees venture into sustainable livelihood, or are they introduced into sustainable livelihood by, say, United Nations High Commission of Refugees, or the Cameroon government come and tell them that, all right, you people will do this, or maybe you want to do petit trade, you want to do frumenting or agriculture. Do they choose their sustainable livelihood on their own, or they are introduced into the sustainable livelihood? And if they are introduced, which type of training and who trains them? That's the first question you will now. So, do refugees venture into sustainable livelihood, or are they introduced into sustainable livelihood? If a refugee comes to a country and he decides to be a motorbike driver, or a farmer, or maybe to bring poultry, or are they trained and said that, all right, you want to do poultry, go and do poultry there? Or you as a refugee say, oh, I want to have a sustainable livelihood, and you get into it, and then that's the first clarification which we will give. Second clarification which we would like to know is that you have as a hypothesis that the policy and environment of Cameroon does not favor refugees. How will you justify the fact that Cameroonians inside Cameroon, who are living in Cameroon, who are not refugees, are not feeling the best in terms of remunerating activities? That means Cameroonians, us the citizens of Cameroon, don't have things that are giving us money. And how will you justify the fact that Cameroonians of Timangolo village, are not having the best in terms of economic activities, and we expect refugees to have the best, for refugees to be earning money, to have all what we are also looking for? That is a question that bothers so many people, because there are so many complaints from the villagers around refugee camps that the government is taking care of refugees more than citizens of the country. So how will you try to justify that fact? How will you try to let us understand that fact very well. Things like work permits, you have been complaining on work permits, procedure for them is complex. Is it not also complex for Cameroonians to have work permits? And the next one is the third question. What inconveniences does the host community, is what I did not see in your work. What inconveniences does the host community of Timangolo or the neighboring towns, what inconveniences does the host community of Timangolo or the neighboring towns have or are witnessing due to the presence of Central African refugees in their locality? Or are witnessing due to the presence of Central African refugees in their locality? Is there conflict of any nature, maybe insecurity or fight for agricultural land or pastoral land, or they are carrying water in a place where the Timangolo people have said that they should not go there and carry water? Did you witness anything of that nature? Mr. President, those are my interventions.
Thank you.
After getting through the work, but the work was good and enriching.
Thank you very much, Mr. Examiner, for this insightful view of the work. Then I will leave the floor to the candidate to attempt answers to the questions that were addressed to her.
So the first question, which she asked me whether refugees venture into sustainable livelihoods or whether they are introduced into sustainable livelihoods. My answer is this. These refugees, upon arrival at the camp, they are introduced into sustainable livelihoods by the camp, by the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, because they do offer them lands and seedlings to cultivate and attain a livelihood. And then some of them venture into sustainable livelihoods by themselves. Because I mentioned there are commercial bike riders, there are shoe menders, there are tailors in the camp. That is not an influence from someone. They decided by themselves to venture into that activity. But the problem is that these activities are not very sustainable. And for the second question, how will you justify the fact that Cameroonians in the Timangolo village are not well to do, but then you expect refugees to have the best? According to the law, I don't know which particular law, but I know there's a law that states that everybody, refugees and Cameroon citizens alike, are equal under the law. Before everything, they even to be justified, they are all equal. So whatever is done for Cameroon, we expect that the same should be done for the refugees. And those refugees, all we're asking for as what they need is work permit. It's not very complex for Cameroon citizens to acquire this work permit, but to my study, it's more complicated for the refugees because they do not even master the official languages of Cameroon. And then for the third question, which asks, what inconveniences does the host community or the neighboring town have on witnessing the presence of refugees? As earlier mentioned, the Timangolo village is a humanitarian setup. It's not a village. It's not a village like a real village with the host population and other locals. It is dominated by that camp. We could identify just about 5 houses of those who are not refugees, and they are even from Central Africa, because most of them, after staying in the camp and getting bored, and they try to leave the camp and try to settle in other areas, but still in Timangolo. Yes, and the only nearby village is Baturi, which is somehow far away from the camp. So the camp is mostly only the refugees who are found in that village.
Okay. Have she answered all the questions?
Yes, but I can just add to her answer that refugees are expected to have access to sustainable livelihood because they are very vulnerable people and they don't have their houses, they don't have their money, their employment. They are living in a strange land. So Cameroonians, You can leave Timangolo and go and stay in any other town of your choice. The refugees are vulnerable people. That's just to add to answer the question. So.
Okay. And yes, the supervisor your mark.
Okay, so I don't have to take your time. Okay, like the examiner clearly said, the central point is the vulnerability of the refugees. They are more vulnerable than others, and because of their vulnerability, they need more attention. And of course, the Timangolo camp was created specifically for the settlement of the refugees, but that does not mean that there are not other inconveniences that the other communities that are closer to them, okay, which the refugees cause. Of course, they have been reported issues of crimes, yes, armed robbery, you know, yes.
Especially in Bedwa.
Yes, because of all that. And only the presence of the refugees itself, it poses some kind of insecurity to the other communities, because seeing some of them, they left out Central Africa, some of them maybe they were part of rebels and all of that. There are often attacks, okay, coming from the other side of the borders from Central Africa. And that is why there is heavy security that Cameroon has actually implemented around those areas. You understand? And as they try to explore the resources and expand, sometimes we have reported cases of conflict because of exploration of forest resources by the refugees. And also another remark, Mr. President of the jury, the examiner did a very wonderful work to talk about the references, but I just wanted to draw a little bit of attention that the methodology of PADWA is a little bit different from that of other universities. Like, for instance, we use the references. We use references and not bibliography. And references is actually the Chicago method, yes. And while bibliography is the Chicago method, while references is the APA method. And so with references that she used, they are only texts that was cited within the work that she had to bring them at the level of bibliography. But for the other details, I just wanted to draw that little remark on that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. If you go to page 4, acknowledgement, there are little things that I just want to point out for you to correct. Last but one line, where you are listing your siblings. I was there.
Yes.
Roman.
Yes.
Roman, not Arab numerals. Not forgetting my siblings, Sieme, Siewe, Kamal, Gere, and Siewe. Is it? I see the and in capital letters. Is it part of the name?
No.
I would like to know because all the names there are in capital letters. Okay, so I needed to know. Then you go to the list of tables. List of tables 9. Roman numerals. You have there table 1, demographic factors. What page do you indicate there? Page 24. Go to page 24 and let's see if that table is there. Is there a table in page 24? The same applies to the table 3, page 31. Go to page 31 and find out if there is any table there. Page 31. Okay. There's no table in page, I said page 30, oh sorry. The same applies with page 33. No table in page 33. Then table 5, that is supposed to be in. But when you go out there to work, you'll be at odds with reality. Then, another issue too that I would like to ask, when you were talking of refugees, I see things about crisis. What about climate change? Are there not possibilities or no cases where climate change was at the cause, was the cause of migrations and refugees? Because in your definition, I did not say it, please.
So I didn't find any information as far as climate change being a cause of those refugees' migration.
Okay. Just
Precisely in Timangolo?
Yeah, precisely in Timangolo.
Okay, precisely in Timangolo, but I'm looking at the definition you made of the word refugee. Within the definition, we have things like things related to crisis. Anyway, but I would like to draw your attention to the fact that an earthquake is a crisis. Okay, a hurricane or any other thing that can make people to flee.
You have desertification, you have flooding. Okay. Yeah.
And this especially this issue of flooding in the far north.
It's related
You see
to
between
climate change.
Chad and Cameroon, you see people flocking from one side to the other. Okay? I think there's another thing that I would like to mention now. The question. I heard your recommendations. And you were like, state should do this. United Nations, UNHCR should do that. But nowhere did I find any recommendation pertaining to the source of migration. We only see people coming because there's war in their areas. Or why didn't you question the causes for war? Because that is the root. Okay, now as an expert, I'll give you the floor to tell us how best you think we can tackle the real causes of refugees in the region. Let's limit ourselves to our region and Central Africa, the Central African Republic especially. Yes, how do we think we can approach this as an expert that you are now?
Do you understand the question?
Do you understand the question? Should I take it over? Okay. When you talk of livelihoods for refugees, for sure, it's costly. It costs a lot of money to take care of refugees in a country. I wonder if there is no better option, that of cutting the problem at the source. Why are these refugees here? Why did they come to Cameroon?
I omitted that particular recommendation. They didn't come to recommend. I would suggest the United Nations High Commission for Refugees to carry out a kind of a discourse with the leaders or the governments of the governments where this refugee crisis start from. Because I believe anything, if there is a discussion, it will not lead to drastic situations. So if they can have a discourse with the government, so that they can try to stop the crisis in their countries, it will not reach the level where people will have to escape their countries to go to other countries for safety.
Good. Not bad. But now, we are talking of the UN. I think the UNHCR is part of the United Nations. And if you look at the United Nations, the Security Council, the 5 members of the Security Council are the major weapon manufacturers of the world. Okay? So you would think these wars that go on in these countries somehow close or remote is not related to them somehow. What are the companies that are in these countries fighting for resources? Because just to attract attention to something, there is no decade in Africa where a rebel movement does not emerge. You have a warlord with weapons, with troops, rebels fighting the central government where they are. Question, where do they get the money from? Where do they get the weapons? From? Do they manufacture the weapons? No. So how do they get them? Let's take the case of Côte d'Ivoire. Somebody like Guillaume Soro, in his 30s, in his early 30s, was already leading a rebellion. How did he earn that money? Where did he get the instructors to train the rebels on arms manipulations and so on? So I'm just trying to trigger some interrogations into your mind. That as a young African, we should come out of this channel that is being devised for us and start thinking out of the box about how to tackle the real causes, the real sources of our problems. So at this stage, I would not expect that much from you, but let me just light the bulbs in your mind. Okay, I don't know if anybody else has any last comment to make.
Of the jury for the corrections and let you know that I will take all the corrections you've made into consideration. Thank you very much.
Well,
That you need to take the corrections, and as you move forward in your studies, I think the president of jury has really thrown the ball to your court to see how you can expand your capacity building, your intellectual progress from that perspective, looking at trying to solve problems strategically from the root cause so that we can have sustainable solutions.
Of the jury for the corrections and let you know that I will take all the corrections you've made into consideration. Thank you very much.
well, at the end of these exchanges, I think the jury will have a minute on its own to deliberate on this work.
Please. You may sit, please.
The 15th of November of our Lord, the year 2019. Ms. Jumla, you defended a BSc dissertation on the topic, Factors Influencing Refugees' Access to Sustainable Livelihoods in Cameroon, the case of car refugees in the Timangolo Refugee Camp, Betua. The jury, after listening to you and after reading your work, has decided as follows. 1, that your work is accepted. And 2, recommends for a few corrections to be made, and has unanimously graded the candidate with an excellent grade of 87. Congrats and for this debut in the academic milieu. Please keep your good work. Keep on.
Thank you very much, sir.
Take your. Use this one.
Thank you.
Come. Please, ma'am.
Hello? Hello? What's that flat fine? Hey, baby, come here. With a flat fine. Okay.
Please, we may now take pictures that.
Okay.
Okay. I feel really happy today, and I'm grateful for my family my lecturers, my friends who made this day a success. I honestly do not know what to say or how to say thank you, but I'm really, really grateful for all they have done for me to see me through all this 3-year course. I'm really grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I am congratulating my sister because she has good marks and I want her to be my coach at home.